it was not this man or his parents who sinned, but that the works of God might be revealed through him. This question is often asked a little differently. Why do bad things happen to good people? In light of the pandemic that we are enduring this spring, we may also ask the same question. Who caused the coronavirus? God or us? And the answer is, in everything that happens, including the coronavirus, the works of God may be manifest. The answer to the cause of bad things, I believe, is that it's not from God. We read in James 1:17, every good and perfect gift is from God. The bad and imperfect things are not from God, they are from us. And some of the things that happen to us, they are obvious. If you don't sleep enough and you have a headache the next day, God is not the cause of your headache. If you drive too fast and you wreck your car, God is not the cause of the accident. If someone else drives too fast and crashes into your car, again, there is a human cause to that accident. What about when there doesn't seem to be a cause? For instance, a hurricane. This is actually an unnatural disaster. The nature that God created was perfect. That's why when we call these things natural disasters, they're disasters of nature, but they're not natural. They're frankly very unnatural. So there is a fallen world that we live in, and the fallen world has sin. The fallen world has bad gene pools. The fallen world has an environment that goes haywire. In the paradise of God, there was the appropriate amount of rain, never too much or too little. There was the appropriate amount of wind, not windstorms that damage things. And when Adam and Eve, humanity, fell away from God, it opened a Pandora's box so that bad things happened to all people, even the best of people. But in everything that happens, good or bad, there's a chance for God to be made manifest, for God to be glorified. So if there's anything positive that has come out of our experience of the last 2.5 months, then God is at the cause of that. In fact, I asked, if you will, to send a sentence or a paragraph to the office about positive things that have happened in your life because of the COVID-19 situation that we deal with. We certainly hear enough negativity. It would be nice to hear some positive things, but to know that God is at the root of those positive things. Going back to the man who was healed in this morning's gospel reading, the man had a miracle. He was an adult, and his whole life he had lived without seeing. Someone said to me the other day that they came to the church to pray, and when they hadn't seen the church in so long, they just entered the church and they started crying because they saw what they hadn't seen with their own eyes for a long time. So imagine this man had never seen anything for his whole life, and all of a sudden he saw colors and he saw faces. Imagine how overjoyed he was. But this joy, it cost him. First, it cost him his parents, because they practically disowned him. They said, he's of age, ask him, because they didn't want to lose their status in the temple. They pushed their son away when he was questioned by the Pharisees, when they were questioned by the Pharisees, and it cost him his parents. It cost him the temple. He was put out of the temple, criticized. You were born in utter sin. So this miracle that came from Jesus, this very good thing that happened, did not come without a cost. And at the end of all of this, imagine how confused his state of mind must have been. I gained my sight, but I've lost my family and I've lost my temple. And then he encounters Jesus, this man that he had not known. And he says to Jesus, I believe. In spite of all that's happened, I believe. I believe that you are the Son of God. I believe. And he worshiped him. The pandemic we are in is costing us things. It's costing us milestones like graduation. It's costing us money. If it hasn't, it will. It's costing us anxiety and peace of mind. It's costing us freedom. In spite of all this, do we still say, I believe? I believe. And when the church is open, partially, as it will be next Sunday, will we come and say, I believe, and worship God? Or has the time away pushed us farther away from God? One final comment about the theme, I believe, and this pertains to Holy Communion. I believe that Holy Communion is the body and blood of Christ. I believe that ordinary substances, bread and wine, that we can buy in the store or make in our kitchen, I believe that these ordinary substances become extraordinary when we call the power of the Holy Spirit on them. I remember when I was a little kid and I would kneel in the pews and I would look up at the moment of consecration expecting to see some kind of a bright light come and at the moment that the gifts were consecrated. And I never saw that because we don't see it in a physical way. It happens in a mystical way. That's why we call these things mysteries. How do these ordinary substances become extraordinary substances? They do it by the power and the grace of the Holy Spirit. Receive communion, we ordinary people become extraordinary people because the extraordinary enters into us. If we come to communion hoping and praying to become extraordinary, then the communion becomes something very special for us. It can't harm us. If we come to communion in an ordinary pedestrian way, not with expectation of being extraordinary, then communion for us becomes nothing. In fact, it can be a negative. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, St. Paul writes, to approach communion in an unworthy manner is to take condemnation on yourself. You can become sick receiving communion if you approach in an ordinary pedestrian manner. But if you are coming with a fear of God, with faith and with love, with a hope to become extraordinary through this experience, it cannot hurt you. I will believe that until my dying breath. When you receive communion, the priest says to you, the servant of God receives the body and blood of Christ unto remission of sins and life everlasting. After the priest receives communion, he says, this has touched my lips, taking away my iniquities and cleansing me of my sins. When we approach communion with the fear of God, with faith and with love, it cannot hurt us. I have always believed that. I will always believe that. The works of God can be made manifest in even the most negative of situations because His grace is not cut out of any corner, out of any person, out of any scenario when we don't ask for it. When we ask for God's grace, it will come into any corner, any scenario, any negative situation, any sadness. And God's grace can take that which is ordinary or that which is sad and make it extraordinary. This is what He did for the blind man in today's gospel lesson.